Hello, you are now entering the infinite void. Hang on tight. We cannot save you now.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode. I'm your co-host Matty.
And I'm your co-host Jacob, and today's episode is the multiverse hypothesis. So it's quite a fun little episode. We took a week off because I was moving, and it took a little bit longer than we thought it was going to. We were so well prepared as well. We recorded a week ahead and everything, and just still not enough. But yeah, we thought we'd blow your minds coming back with a strong one this week. It's a pretty interesting subject, to say the least. But yeah, Matty, what off the top of your head do you know about the multiverse?
I know not that much about it, to be honest. I
Cool.
sort of know what it is and the sort of basics, but no real detail. So hopefully, but I'm looking forward to this one to learn a bit about it as well. So I hope you've done your research.
Yeah. So I'll kick it off. So when I was probably in my teenage, probably when I was around like 14, 15, and I was reading comics and stuff, I kind of got blown away by this idea of like a multiverse. And that's kind of like what started it for me before I even knew that it was even an idea or a theory. And I just really liked the idea that there was this idea of multiple universes all happening, and it's not necessarily that like different things could be happening in, say, different universes that are like completely different, but it can be like alternate timelines and stuff like that. So it's like a really interesting, fun, I don't know, fun thing to talk about. And it makes for great sci-fi films as well, as we'll probably find out going forward. It's a great little writing tool. But essentially, the multiverse is just a hypothetical group of multiple universes. And it's the idea that, like everything in our universe that we can see so far, the universe is just the next bit. So, like, you have suns with planets orbiting them, so you've got loads of solar systems, and then you've got loads of galaxies, and then you've got loads of superclusters and so on, and then it gets to the point where you've got loads of universes. But it's interesting. It's cool to see like how people talk about it, because for me, I'm quite a visual person, so I like to imagine these kind of things, which obviously is quite hard to do because when you're imagining the universe or infinity or anything like that, it gets a little bit difficult. But one really good way that I saw, which for anybody listening, if you use this as a focusing point of trying to get your head around it, is the idea of it's kind of like a river, and the universes act as bubbles in this river, and some are expanding and some are contracting and so on, like that. So keep that in your head, because that helped me get my head around some of this as we go forward through it. But yeah, it's interesting because it's cropped up in lots of places. It's not really just science or pop culture in general. It's cropped up in astronomy, religion, philosophy. I don't actually know what this is. Transpersonal psychology.
I'm going to take a pass on that.
Yeah. And it's obviously cropped up in music and literature as well. And then obviously all the sciences. So it's interesting because it could fundamentally change how we view everything. But at the same time, it could also kind of render everything pointless because everything's happening somewhere, and you just happen to be in the one where these circumstances have happened to you. But
yeah, I think that there is sort of like two almost sides to it. There's like the scientific side, and you're thinking about what this could potentially mean for us, and what we could potentially do with this, or what implications it has on sort of our understanding of science. but then there's also the sort of philosophy side of it and sort of what our place is in the universe or the universes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's sort of almost reminiscent of how when the first galaxies were discovered, there was this sort of pushback, because like we were a part of a galaxy and that was like our entire world, and then we discovered there were billions of galaxies out there.
Yeah.
And obviously we've not sort of got concrete or proper evidence for multiverse yet, for different universes, but it would be a sort of similar thing that our like world has become many times larger, or perhaps infinitely large. So I think it's quite interesting, sort of a moral standpoint of what our place is. And
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And taking it to a bit of a lighter note for a minute. So like with like pop culture and stuff, I don't know, have you been watching any of the new Star Trek?
I'm not a Star Trek fan.
Cool, right.
I've not really seen any of it.
I'm not really a Trekkie fan, to be fair. I've always leaned more towards like the Star Wars side of it if I've got to watch space stuff. But even then, I'm not really a Star Wars fan, so I'm sorry anybody watching. But yeah, so I've been watching the new Star Trek. I think it's called Star Trek Discovery, and it's got a really like interesting storyline. And this is why I was going to bring it up, because I think you'd quite like it. And they play on the idea of like the multiverse. Well, at least I hope they do, because otherwise this is going to seem completely pointless. But from what I've gathered so far is some people have come from a parallel universe, and it's just really weird how they've explained it. So it's like the idea that there was like a conjunction where these two realities like collided, and then they crossed over, but now these two universes are like expanding at ridiculously quick rates far from each other, so they can never go back to their base reality. But like the way that they break it down in the TV show is actually like really cool. Yeah. And then you've obviously got like lighter examples with like Rick and Morty, where it's a little bit more cynical, and they kind of use it as like a what would you call it, kind of like a plot for how they write all their episodes. So like every episode they've got an expendable reality, because if it goes completely down the pan, then you just jump to another reality in the following one. And that's why you get like really funny story writing where like the squirrels take over Earth in one and silly things like that, because you can just keep hopping over. And then most recently, I think in like the big blockbuster films, it's probably got to be like the Marvel films. And that's where it definitely got me into it first, with like leaning on like the whole idea of the multiverse, because I don't know, I find it really interesting, because like I was saying, it could mean so much, and it like changes the way that we view things as well. Because like that was another thing that I was reading from my research, was that, like the whole idea of like the grandfather paradox.
Yeah, I know the grandfather paradox.
Yeah, well, they were saying how like with the multiverse, like hypothesis, that kind of gets around that one, because you're not necessarily like, say if we do figure out time travel or something like that, you're not necessarily going back in time and like killing your granddad. You would be going like to a different timeline, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then you'd be altering that timeline's future, but not your original timeline's future, if that makes sense. It just seemed really cool. I was really interested in it. I wanted to talk to you about it a little bit, because I thought that is actually kind of cool, because then it kind of like full circles that issue that they were having with like a lot of films and stuff like that too.
Yeah, particularly in sort of like sci-fi and films, the multiverse is obviously used a lot. It's quite a powerful plot device, isn't it?
Yeah. But getting a little bit more into the science of it, because I wanted to ask you about this. I watched a Lex Fridman podcast where they were talking about the multiverse, and I can't remember who they had on, but the way that he was describing it was, he was saying that it's like, if you imagine it like a wave, and then you've got all of these like universes or timelines or whatever you want to call them all in a line. So the ones that are like next to each other, I'm sorry for anyone that's listening because I'm doing like a visual diagram on this webcam right now, but like the ones that are closer to each other will have like less in them that differ, if that makes sense. And then the ones that are like further up on this wavelength would look vastly different.
Yeah.
So then it was like the way that he described it was like, so there will be some like timelines or other universes, say, because his basic explanation for it, because I'm kind of butchering this, was the idea that if it is infinite, then like there's infinite possibilities, which would mean that there are infinite timelines going on at once. So like there is a timeline kind of for everything. What if you got up or if you didn't get up, and for every day, if your parents met, if your parents didn't met, and so on and so on and so on, with all these different outcomes. And the way that he described it was like, so you could have like infinite versions of realities where they're all identical, but one thing might slightly be different. So say it could be a letter or a color or anything. And then you'd have infinite other ones that would be vastly different. And this is kind of like how he described it. And it kind of just blew my mind a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's sort of... if you sort of go down the paths of like these multiverses are... There's infinitely many of them that are like different in every way possible. Just trying to think about it, like, you can imagine a universe where everything is exactly the same as our universe, but just like one atom is misplaced by the tiniest of amounts, and you do that for every atom in the universe.
Yeah.
You know, like the numbers just get stupidly big.
Well, this was the other thing too that I was going to say to you as well, was like when you start doing that, it kind of almost seems like a waste of computing power. I know that's kind of now taken like a human-centric approach of like, why would you do that? Well, like what? Like surely if it is like costs so much to run in a hypothetical world, our universe, with like what is needed to have it what it is, why would you have infinite versions of that like running it for all of the other things too?
Yeah, there's definitely, you get into like other problems then of like the uncertainty principle of like, we know that like at a quantum level things have an inherent uncertainty, that you the basic premise is you can't say how fast something is going and where it is exactly. Like you can't do that. Well, how can you define a universe that is just slightly different if there is an uncertainty within them? It's you get lots of sort of difficult questions to answer.
Well, it kind of falls back onto your thing as well, doesn't it, with like the whole the chaos theory thing too, because like if you had infinite versions of it, like you're saying, every atom playing out, it's just going to be crazy.
Yeah.
No, that's an interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way.
Yeah, like it's very. I think the multiverse theory is, at a conceptual level, is quite easy to think about, and that's why films and sci-fi.
Yeah.
It's very easy to think, oh, okay, there's like a clone of our universe, but instead of us, there's like robots instead or something. Like it's quite an easy thing to conceptualize and think about. But then if you just sort of take it like just a bit further and you start to say, well, rather than like massive changes like that, like what if just one atom is slightly moved? And how can you even define that if you can't know exactly where the atom is?
My next question then would be, so say if we like took that approach for everything now within this, so does that mean like even going down to like the strong force and the weak force and stuff like that, you could hypothetically have a universe where that differs and reality as you know it can't actually happen, and then there's infinite versions of that universe that doesn't even turn into a universe because it didn't have the same circumstances that it had here? Can that happen?
This is where it gets really, really difficult in that you're starting to, like physics, like you talk about like the strong and weak force.
Yeah.
We don't, like, this is just my perspective as a physicist, we don't ever try and ask why something is something.
Yeah.
Like, so let's just take gravity or something quite easy. We know that gravity is 9.81
Yeah.
meters per second squared. And we can say sort of how that is, how that is related to the laws of physics, and we describe why it is, but we never, we don't really ask why it is.
Yeah.
Why is it that number? And if you get to the sort of the point of you're saying, okay, what if we have a universe where instead of 9.81, it's 10.81?
Yeah.
You have to ask the question of why would it be that?
Yeah.
And there's not really an answer to that, because we don't ask the why question of the universe. We just observe it, describe it, and try to explain how it does stuff.
So I guess then hypothetically, it could, if you were taking the approach that the reason that there are infinite amounts of universes is because there are infinite possibilities, but then that's just being like super hypothetical.
Yeah, you're sort of asking, is this something that is fixed and it will be fixed everywhere, or have we just like observed a version of it?
Yeah.
So it's really hard, and this is, there's quite a lot of these sort of like modern areas of physics. The one that's talked about quite a lot is like string theory.
Yeah.
In that, is this even physics? Like, you're sort of going beyond what physics is, and you're, at physics at its heart, you have to be able. It has to be verifiable, and it has to be disprovable. The classic one that's always given is it's called Russell's teapot, named after Bertrand Russell, and it's this idea of, imagine there was a teapot around the sun, like just orbiting around the sun, and you said, okay, it's teapot sized, made out of regular teapot stuff, and then that's all it is.
Yeah.
And you say to astronomers, like, you get a group of astronomers together, and they say, we've used our best telescopes, we've looked everywhere that it can be, it's not there. The teapot doesn't exist. And then you come back and say, oh no, the teapot exists, it's just smaller than you can possibly see, or it's made of something that you can't observe.
Yeah.
Well, if it's not something we can see and it's not something we can observe or interact with, what is it? Like, what does it mean to us? And you get this sort of problem with the multiverse theory. You start to say, okay, we imagine universes where the fundamental physics is different to ours. What would that mean? And you sort of start, like with string theory, it sort of starts to become not a physics problem. It's a problem of philosophy.
Yeah.
What it means for stuff to exist. So it's really difficult, and it's quite sort of contentious with physics. Like, there are people who obviously will say, oh, string theory or multiverse theory is like the obvious answer, we need to pursue it. And then there's people saying, well, what you're putting forward is not falsifiable.
Yeah.
It's not physics. Why are we looking at this? So
yeah.
It gets sort of quite heated with these sorts of things.
It's interesting one, because like, for me, this kind of subject, I have like a massive interest in it, but it's more so for like the philosophy behind it, I'd say. But for me anyway, like looking at like the idea of a multiverse, for me it's like, so why would we have a multiverse kind of thing? And then I'll start going off on like crazy thought patterns of being like, well, is it to kind of just account for everything? Like, well, we'd have multiple timelines so that everything that can happen has happened, and then if it has happened, then it will happen, kind of thing. Or do you go the other way of like, so if there is a multiverse and there are multiple universes, are they all infinite, and are they all expanding infinitely, or are they all finite and stuff like that? And those are the kind of questions that I really enjoy like thinking about. and reading about. So I don't know. I think it's interesting. Like, I was going to ask you this. What do you think? Like, if you had to place a bet, do you think that, these are my two questions to you. Would you say that the universe is infinite or finite? And would you say that there is a multiverse or that there is just a universe?
So I'll start with the multiverse one. I'll sort of come on to some of the like discussion about evidence and things in a bit, but my personal take on it is that there isn't a multiverse.
Okay.
That would be my sort of gut reaction. And on is our universe finite or infinite? I'd have to pass. It's quite a sort of nuanced question because I know there's things about sort of like a closed finite or an open finite, like these sorts of things. It's quite a difficult question.
Yeah, I saw something, and I might get this wrong now, so sorry if anybody is on it with this subject, but I saw something that, like, if it's if it's flat, it's finite, or is it infinite? And then if it's yeah, but I watched this diagram on Twitter anyway, and it looked like a Pringle, is what they were effectively saying. And they were saying that because it's flat but curved, it's infinite, but they don't know if it's actually infinite. But this shape was infinite. But
there is this sort of. I said I honestly don't particularly know much about this area of physics, but there's this idea of something could be infinite but curve back on itself. So you can't, like, you can travel forever in any direction, but you will curve back on yourself. So
So like if you infinitely went right, you'd get back to where you were.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. That's just like a computer game, isn't it? Really.
Yeah.
With the grids, and if you just keep going in one direction, you'll come back to the grid you started on. See, that's where multiverse for me kind of comes into it, is when you start talking about simulation theory. And I'm not going to like dive into that because I know we want to do a whole big boy episode on that. But like, it would make sense to me then, like a multiverse, because then it just seems like, oh, it's just a program running multiple versions of this to see which one gets to the end state like the most efficient or the quickest or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Like that, what's that game called on the computer where it's just lines and the whole, is it Life? Is it just called Life?
Yes.
Yeah. And the whole point of it is it just has to keep going.
Yeah. I think if you could prove that this was a simulation, I would automatically think that we were part of multiple simulations that you would call a multiverse. Like, I think that's without question. If someone had created a simulation of the universe, you would naturally do it multiple times.
Well, that isn't that like one of the main questions anyway. Like, if once we create a simulated universe, there's an argument that we could be in a simulated universe, and then so on and so on and so on.
Yeah.
Is it Elon Musk that says we're not in base reality?
I think there's quite a lot of people, but yeah, Elon Musk is sort of quite outspoken about it.
We're a simulation within a simulation within a simulation within a simulation.
But it's almost like the same. Obviously, they're very different, but it is almost like the same sort of problem of like
can't prove it.
It's a matter of what we are. If you start from the position of we are the original, then you don't have any sort of evidence or even reason to believe that we would be sort of lower down the chain.
Yeah.
That we be part of a simulation, or that we would be part of a multiverse if you just take us to be it. Let's say, like. Yeah,
I can't remember who this was, but somebody did a YouTube video about it, and they were trying to break it down like that, and like the idea of it kind of being like a simulation or like a game, but for multiverse. And they were saying like you kind of have to imagine it like Sims, and everybody went and bought a copy of Sims. So there's one universe, but you've all got your own copy.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's all just localized to you, and the same things play out and the same things happen in those ones, but it's all individual to the observer. And he was talking about all this, and I was like, oh no, you're breaking my brain.
Yeah. But just while we're on the top, like while you said about like people having like, their own version of stuff, one thing I did see about multiverse theory, it was quite a while back, so I won't know the exact details, but there was this. It really made me feel quite ill, to be honest. This like tying it into what like consciousness is.
Okay.
That like consciousness is if you try to think about it, is a really horrible thing to try and describe and think about it, and it really is quite sickening.
Yeah.
Like just to try and describe what we are, but like it's entirely possible that like the universe that I am experiencing is one universe that exists alongside a universe that you are experiencing.
Yeah.
And that this idea of even the universe being a thing is just part of our consciousness. And in it, you get really like difficult questions about like what our experience of stuff, is that real? Is that what things actually are? Does that even exist? Because we know that our brains can trick us. Like you can have dreams at night, you can have sort of effects like deja vu and things. Your brains can fabricate stuff
Yeah.
completely without your knowledge. Is it possible that our brains have fabricated the entire universe and that we are living in something that we have created ourselves in our own head?
Yeah.
And
I tell you what, actually, something that made me feel really, really sick, right? And you'll like this one, right? So I can't remember who it is. Actually, yes, I can. It is. Oh no, I can't. It's a comedian anyway, and he was talking about it, and they were talking about when they all went to Burning Man, and they were like doing psychedelics and stuff, and one of the mates was having like a really, really, really bad time, and was like sitting in the back and was tripping out and was like questioning everything, was saying that like he'd been and spoken to the like keeper of this domain and all this kind of stuff, and like their mates were like freaking him out, like winding him up, like as you would, and they started playing this joke on him, and they were like, oh no, we're going to run out of quarters. You need to go and put more quarters in the machine. And he's like, what machine? What do you mean? And he's like, if we don't put quarters in the machine, the game's going to finish. And he's like, what's the game? And he's like, don't you remember? And they were like, he's like, no. And he's like, we went to the shopping mall and we went and played the arcade game Life, but it's going to stop if you don't carry on putting quarters in it. And the guy like starts freaking out, and he's like searching the car for like all these things and stuff. And they were talking about it, and I was like, that's insane. Can you imagine like you live your entire life and then you die, and that moment when you die, your eyes just open and you're standing in an arcade and you just plugged into like some super high-tech game and just like lived a life for like 20 minutes, and it really freaked me out. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. But like with like the consciousness stuff and like the universe, they like took it like a bit further, and they were like, what if like this universe is just us having a dream, and that there are our brains, but not our, I don't know if it would be our brain or the brain is like having other dreams at the same time that are other universes, and we just happen to be in this one. It's like, oh.
Yeah, man. I've actually started doing like some reading and stuff with like Buddhism and like reading into all of that. So I've been learning about like the Akashic plane and like how Buddhism's talk about like consciousness and stuff, and all that's been blowing my mind. Like how they treat like just the whole idea of like Eastern consciousness and stuff is, I find it really interesting. But yeah, no, I agree with you, man, because it's one of those things, right, which is super cool if it existed and was a thing, but like unless we can do anything with it, does it really matter?
Yeah, I think that's really what it comes down to, and I think so it's like there is like evidence for the multiverse. So like the one that's always spoken about is, I've got a sort of news article here about it, is in like the cosmic microwave background radiation. So for people that don't know, there's this sort of a background noise of the universe. You know, you can have a look at it yourself. That emanates from the Big Bang. So basically, energy that was left from the Big Bang has been spread out through the universe, and now
Yeah.
it's just a very sort of long wavelength, so microwave. That's where that comes from. Sort of energy just in the background, sort of thing. Sort of like an afterglow. And there's this. They've mapped it very, very accurately, like very accurately to within. So the radiation has like a temperature associated with it, and I think it's within like fractions of a Kelvin. It is really accurately mapped, and there's this like one cold spot,
Okay.
like so it's pretty uniform, like very, very uniform. But there's this one slightly colder spot, and like people have like suggested that this is where like the next universe touches ours. So like some of the radiation is sort of being used. So like you said with the bubbles, that like
Yeah.
the boundary, some of the energy is being used to form the boundary, or it's being sort of leaked across. Yeah, and again, it's not really provable or falsifiable, and it makes it very difficult to sort of ask questions about it, because
Yeah.
like my personal view on it is it's more like a religion. It's just something
Yeah.
that you believe in or you don't, and you can. What is evidence just depends on your viewpoint. If you ask like a deeply religious person, like, what's your evidence that like your religion, Christianity, is real? What is your evidence for that? Well, we have the Bible. You know, the Bible says that all this is real. Well, that's just your viewpoint of that. And my
Yeah.
view would be that the Bible doesn't prove that. So, and it's the same with this thing. That you're telling me that this cold spot is the multiverse touching. You don't have, again, it's down to that why. You know, you don't have a reason to believe that. You're just saying that that is what you think this is. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's so difficult.
Yeah, I found that with like a lot of my research, because like like most of the stuff that I've got here, it's all to do with like people like just talking about it as an idea.
Mm-hmm.
So like you've got you've got like the ancient Greeks, they kind of talked about it and the idea of like infinite or parallel worlds with like the collision or the collapse of atoms. And then you've got like Erwin Schrödinger in 1952, who did a lecture and like basically showed his equations on how he found different histories, but they weren't like alternative histories. They were like simultaneous histories, and he couldn't understand why. And then you've just got the American philosopher William James, who actually coined the term multiverse in 1895, which is quite a long time ago.
Yeah. It's quite a like well established sort of idea, I think.
I think it's really interesting, you know, when you like just look at humans in general, and like we've like really got the torchlight and shone it far. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
we've learned and discovered so much about our exterior, and we know next to nothing about our interior. And I don't mean like body, I just mean consciousness.
Yeah.
Like what we know about what we're in compared to what we are is so like different.
Yeah.
It blows my mind. It actually does blow my mind.
I think we should put down consciousness as like an episode to do in the future.
Yeah, no, we
I could talk about it all day.
we should do like a that's what we should do for a future. We should just do like one super long episode in the future, and we'll just do AI, simulation theory, consciousness, and if anybody wants to come and listen for 8 hours, they can.
I'll have to bring some drinks for that.
Yeah, I'll do like a proper hardcore session. But no, I think I don't really have anything else on the multiverse. It was just more so a fun thing to get the listeners to think about. I think it's a interesting idea.
Yeah, So, one thing, just I guess to finish up on, was you just said that like Schrodinger. So the multiverse theory is often like tied into like interpretation of quantum theory.
Yes.
So
Just before you start, I took a sentence out of my research because I knew it would drive you up the wall, and they started referencing like quantum stuff, and I was like, I'm not going to upset May, but go for it.
So like quantum theory is again like we don't really understand why this is, but the universe seems inherently quantum, and the classical interpretation of it is called the Copenhagen interpretation.
Yeah.
So this is, I think I discussed it in the chaos episode a few times about how there is a wave function associated with stuff.
Yeah.
And what you know, the maths checks out, you can do it. I have done it. You have a wave function that says, okay, there's the probability of stuff being places. And when you observe it, you collapse that wave function down to a single state.
Yeah.
So your electron wave function goes from the electron being somewhere over here to, you look at it and it becomes here.
Yeah.
So, you know, and you could do experiments that do exactly this. The multiverse theory is actually a different interpretation of it, where rather than, I think there is this sort of still randomness associated with it, and this sort of superposition effect of you having different sort of wave functions on top of each other corresponding to different universes. But rather than them collapsing into one state, they split into many states.
Yeah.
And this is one example. I think one explanation of like how the multiverse theories actually like come about is that, as you said, everything that can happen will happen, and they just simply, you know, you start with one universe, one seed universe, which I presume would be the Big Bang, and then immediately every single effect that is happening results in a split that causes multiple sort of universes to diverge from one another. And I guess it does. I've never really thought about it. It is chaos theory, isn't it? You know, you start with a state, and very, very small changes in it cause multiple different effects.
Yeah.
I guess I've never really thought about it, but yeah, to just sort of base that sort of quantum interpretation point, because it's quite a big sort of part of multiverse theory if you start to do it mathematically.
Yeah. My one last thing actually that I just want to add to it quickly, because you gave me one last thought. That the whole idea of like, you know, when we were discussing like how like the universe could end, and we were talking how like the different ones that we've got, so like you've got like heat death, and then you've just got the big crunch, and what was the other one? I can never remember the other one, what it's called. Is the other one just where everything expands so far away from each other that?
I think that is heat.
Oh, okay. There's three, because I can see the post in my head because I made it ages ago.
Is the other one entropy?
Yes, that's it.
I think it presumes that it sort of stops expanding or something, but essentially everything just becomes completely uniform. So there's no sort of bits to do anything. Everything is exactly the same everywhere.
Yeah. Now this is completely hypothetical. I'm not saying I've just cracked reality, anyone, or anything like that. But like, that's an interesting idea, in that if there was a multiverse and we are imagining it like a river with bubbles, that all of those ways that the universe could end could actually be possible, but it's just dependent on that universe which one happens. And then say that's why we've got the Big Bang, because isn't there a whole thing with like universes giving birth to universes?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was just thinking about it now. Actually, it's like I think we've sort of been looking at the idea of multiverse as being, like you said, with like the river and the bubbles, like they exist now, sort of next to each other, sort of thing. But it's entirely possible that rather than being sort of infinite in space, if you can think of different universes as being in space. They could be infinite in time, that there's been infinitely many universes before us and infinitely many universes after us. It's this sort of Big Bang and collapse or whatever and make a new one.
Yeah.
So there is that sort of other element of them, sort of like giving birth or seeding them.
That little
and
dot could be your seed then as well.
Mm-hmm.
The little-
You get like weird stuff about like our black holes, like
Yeah.
portals to other universes and stuff. So
Yeah.
and again, we just don't have the answers. It's complete speculation at that point.
Yeah. And if anybody does go through it, they're not coming back to tell us what happened. So
Yeah, pretty much.
it's pretty much gone. But no, I say let's move over into some news for the week.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
I think I've got a few more topics in you, so I guess I'll start.
Okie dokie.
So with the space stuff, just a quick one that I had was, I know we've been discussing recently. Well, we started with space debris, didn't we? News that this year is the most amount of small satellites launched in a year already. So this article was from a little while ago, so from November 10th, this was published. And obviously, I don't have any evidence of this, but you'd think with the obviously coronavirus this year, things might have slowed down a little bit. But no, 2020 has the record number of small satellites launched. So in the first 10 months of 2020, there were 1,029 small satellites launched, of which Starlink, SpaceX, were 773.
Jeez.
Yeah. And that's pretty crazy. So, yeah, that's the most of any year. So I'm just looking here. The previous record last year, 385 satellites, small satellites.
Oh, wow. So that's a massive jump.
So in 10 months compared to 12 months, it's basically tripled. So yeah, with like the space debris stuff, I thought that might be quite interesting.
Yeah.
And it seems like, yeah, with like these like constellations like Starlink, they are talking about like tens of thousands of satellites being up there, and I think we'll probably start seeing issues quite soon.
You reckon?
Yeah, I would put money on in the next 5 or 10 years there'll be a major incident, because nobody seems to be doing anything about it. But...
No, I saw that the UK Space Agency had an announcement this week on it. They've got some machine that they're planning on putting up into orbit.
Yeah, I did see this briefly about it.
Looked cool. It looked like a black shoebox or something that like sucked stuff up.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, so using that sort of capture mechanism to actually try and remove some of it, but I guess we'll sort of hold on and see if it works or not.
Yeah. So I'll try and lighten it up a little bit after that. So the Crew 1 launch went well. Obviously, if you're watching this, you've probably watched it. But yeah, it went well. I don't know if you watched it, Matty, on the...
I didn't stay up till 12:30. I watched the highlights though. So.
No, that's fair. That's fair. It's so cool, man, watching them like get delivered in Teslas and everything. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so Supercluster, and for anybody who doesn't know who Supercluster is, go and check them out. But they're essentially kind of like a creative agency for space, I'd say. That's probably the best way to describe them. And their website, they launched last week a astronaut database. So you can now go on their website and basically look at everyone that has ever been to space and find out how long they went, how they went, what rocket they went on, why they were there, and all this kind of stuff. It's pretty cool. But a little bit of funny news, because they took the Baby Yoda plush toy as the 0G indicator. Loads of people were commenting on all of Supercluster's stuff and partitioned for it. And the Baby Yoda plush toy has now been added to the database of things humans have put in space. So you can go and see that now. For anybody that loves Baby Yoda, he's in space.
Yeah, it's pretty cute. Baby Yoda thing floating around.
I think that zero G thing's so cool. For the demo one, they had did they have a dinosaur or was it a Planet Earth? I can't remember, but it's so awesome.
Yeah, I think it's Planet Earth. I remember seeing about that. Yeah,
Because
great idea.
you can buy that, can't you, off the SpaceX website? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd totally do it, but it's the import tax for the UK for me.
Ridiculous.
I'd be head to toe in like SpaceX merch and NASA merch and all that kind of stuff if it didn't cost so much money to ship.
Yeah, it's not even just NASA. I was looking the other day at the they've got a new ESA patch, so European Space Agency patch. I think they've updated it with a few new members. I was like, oh, that'd be cool. It only costs like €7, but the delivery fee was like 29 quid. So I'm not paying that.
Crazy amount. What else have you got then for news?
More depressing news. Well, quite interesting. So in science, this year, another record. That this is the most storms in the Atlantic hurricane season on record. So the article that I've got here was written with the naming of Tropical Storm Theta in the Azores, so in the Atlantic, which was the 29th named storm. Since then, they've actually named Iota as well, so that's the 30th named storm, and that's actually become a Category 5 hurricane. But yeah, so essentially for sort of people that don't know, when they're naming these storms in the Atlantic sort of basin, they give them names A through Z, so you get like Storm Hurricane Alfie and then Bert and things like this. They miss a few because there's not that many names beginning with X and Z, but yeah, they name them up all the way to the end of their alphabet, and then they've had to sort of give them Greek names as well, so they've had storms, alpha, beta, sort of thing. So that's only I think 2 times in the past they've had to use the Greek names, but now they've got to Iota, which is a record for the number of storms in a year.
Jeez.
And yeah, the article I was looking at was like there's quite a lot of sort of storms, sort of records that have been broken on this. Like they all arrived much earlier, so the first 9 storms of this season arrived earlier than ever before. So it seems to sort of indicate the sort of concerns about climate change. They said that actually these storms weren't massive, which again, like we're not expecting huge events, just like big events to become more frequent.
Yeah,
and it sort of seems to support that. So yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, they said only 5. So Laura, Teddy, Delta, Epsilon, and Eta have become major hurricanes. I think Iota might have become a major hurricane as well. That's not Category 5, but yes, it's not that these storms are like hugely devastating. It's just that they're happening much more sort of common.
Yeah. Jeez. Well, for my final bit of news, it's also quite depressing. Well, it's not depressing actually. It kind of ties in there with the climate change and global warming even. But basically, physics.org have come out with a really interesting piece, and they're basically talking about how global warming triggered the evolution of giant dinosaurs back in the dinosaur period. And basically what they're talking about is in the first era of dinosaurs, I'm not even going to try and say that word, but Surudamurififia, these dinosaurs were quite small and they had an average body size of around 10 meters. But then something happened on the Earth which pushed massive amounts of carbon up into the atmosphere. And then this period, which lasted 180 million years, was called the Jurassic period. And this made all of the dinosaurs grow exponentially in size.
Yeah.
Which kind of cool. I'm a small guy, so that's one thing that I could get behind global warming for. If I'm going to be 20 foot by the end of the decade, then let's do it.
Yeah, I have heard about this before actually. I was reading about it with snakes, how these sort of you get these like super warm conditions that allow like massive snakes to exist. Just because snakes in particular they're cold blooded, so being able to absorb more energy basically means they can grow larger. So yeah, it was interesting with the dinosaurs as well. They sort of think that kicked off.
I don't really understand it though, because like it seems like the bigger you are, the more hassle it is for your survival. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It seems like if you want the longer if you want to live long, you got to be smaller.
Yeah.
So like, unless I guess actually I'm just chatting, seeing this because if there was more carbon and stuff, then yeah, they're going to absorb it, aren't they?
I think there's sort of I think it's not fully understood, but there's like like I said, with like the snakes, there's ideas of them. It's simply easier for them to exist. They expend less energy keeping warm, so they can use more energy for growth, sort of thing. And then you've got sort of evolutionary pushes, so it's possible that more carbon, it gets warmer, trees grow taller, for example. Well, if the trees are growing taller, then you'd expect also the sort of like brontosauruses, dinosaurs that eat trees, to also grow taller, just as
Yeah.
continue eating. So
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, I think it's not massively understood, but I can see how it could happen. It's quite cool, I guess. I think global warming tied into that. Yeah. Yeah. So like my last bits of news were both tech related. So firstly, I guess I'll go with one that's sort of related to global warming also. So this is news this week that the UK is planning to ban the new sale of petrol and diesel cars from 2030 now. So I think they had penciled it for 2040, and they've now brought that
It's
10
better.
years forward.
That's better.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be a huge, huge ask. It's going to be like, obviously it needs to happen. I hope it does happen, but there's a lot of things that need to be done to hit that, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure. I was just thinking because like even the average person that like finances a car,
yeah,
that's like what 3 years, 3, 4, 5 years as a standard lease. So like you're not going to be able to do that in 5 years' time, or unless there's like some scheme where the government's going to give you your money back for your car, because otherwise it's going to be worth nothing after you've paid it off for like 5 years.
Yeah, exactly. I think what could happen is, like you said, like you got to be thinking. I know a lot of people buy a car as a big investment. You think, oh, I'll keep it for 5 years and then sell it on. I can get. This is why people buy cars like Volkswagen. They hold their value really well. You can keep a car in good condition for 5 years and sell it on for half the price, sort of thing. So you got to be thinking, why would anyone buy a car in 2025 if they know it's going to be
Exactly.
sort of, yeah. But
Exactly.
I don't think it counts for the sale of used cars, which potentially this could mean, oh yeah, great, everyone's buying electric cars, or it could just mean that people end up buying more
Used cars.
older, less efficient, worse petrol diesel cars.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And I genuinely think that's what will happen.
Yeah.
Because I looked at the figures before doing this. Last year, I think they've sold 2.3 million new cars, and there was 7.7 million used car sales. So it's about 3-1 on used to new sales. And there's obviously issues of things like getting the charging infrastructure in place and that sort of thing. I think for a lot of people, it's quite simple. You just put a thing on the side of your house or your garage, good job, sort of thing. But as we become more urbanized and people are living like high rises, how do you charge your car if you have to park it on street parking?
Yeah.
Who even pays for that? Like, you don't necessarily even have a car parking space. You just pull it on a street somewhere.
Yeah.
Who pays for that? They've spoken about putting like charges on on like lampposts and stuff, would you have to like tap your card to it and sort of pay overnight? There's a lot of problems with it, but realistically, for people to even there's obviously the tech issues of like the range being increased, etc. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down in 10 years' time. Will there be a comparable electric car that you can buy for £15,000?
Yeah.
You know, because I don't even think Tesla is eyeing that market, are they? Yet?
No, I know they've got their 24,000 one, haven't they? That they're aiming for.
Even so, for like most of the population, £24,000 is not what they're going to pay for a car. So,
no.
You know, I would fully expect you'd see new car sales drop and people just buy more used petrol cars.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I presume at some point they will ban petrol and diesel cars at some point. And again, so I think it's a step in the right direction, but it's sort of needed. It's different saying, oh, we are going to ban new sales from 2030 to actually putting things in place that mean people want to buy electric.
Yeah, it's different. Like getting it ready and then saying.
Yeah, I think that's quite interesting. And then the final thing, just a bit of fun. I've got it here in my notes. Says Netflix invents TV. This is I heard it on the radio and I found an article about it. Was Netflix are launching an old-fashioned TV channel in France, and I was like, "What? Why on earth would they do that? Like, that's such a weird thing to do." And I don't know why they've chosen France in particular, but apparently there's a demand for it because people don't like choosing what they want to watch.
Okay.
And I mean, I can sort of get it because, like, with like old-fashioned TV, I will occasionally just like turn it on and just watch whatever is there, sort of thing. But like, you can spend half an hour scrolling through Netflix trying to find something that you want to watch. So I guess that's what they're trying to do. But but yeah.
Don't they? Netflix still send like DVDs in the post to people in America, don't they, and stuff like that?
I don't know if they still do that, but yeah.
I think they do because I saw something. There are more people in America this year, I think, that were getting Netflix DVDs sent to them in the post than something else, and it was like a really weird statistic, but it was like trending on Twitter, and I was like, oh no.
What?
Because it was something to do with there are certain areas in America that still don't have good enough internet to be even like have the service, but they were saying that like it was crazy because they were showing it, and like some of these houses were getting like stacks of DVDs like delivered to their houses and stuff, and it was just like, man.
Yeah, America's internet infrastructure. I have a lot of American infrastructure. Like, I did a little course on it about like their roads and their trains and stuff. It's so poor.
Yeah,
terrible.
Yeah.
And I think like there's this issue. Is it Sprint and T-Mobile? I think they're the main networks for sort of mobile data. They just control basically everything.
Yeah, Verizon, isn't it, or something? It's just like
yeah.
half of America's one, half of America's the other.
Yeah, and I was like, when I went on a summer school, I met with a girl from Colorado, and we just happened to start sort of talking about like phone contracts and stuff. And I was like, yeah, like, I get my phone. It's 37 quid a month, and it has Spotify on it, and like the phone is free, and that includes like unlimited data. And she's like, you what? I was like, yeah, like you can get a good amount of data for like 25 quid a month, sort of thing. And she's like, are you serious? And she was paying, I think, like $60-$70 a month. Well, I think it was 2 gigabytes.
Oh my god!
And I was like, "Are you serious? Like, what are you doing?" Like,
yeah, that's insane.
Yeah, it blows my mind sometimes. But yeah, when you said about the DVDs, I was like, that can't be true. And I was like, oh yeah, America.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's insane. But I guess it makes sense because it would be like a phone provider trying to provide service to the whole of Europe, wouldn't it? Really,
Yeah.
it is a task.
Hmm.
But I've been watching like all the stuff going on with the election and everything. It's been fun watching all these 5G adverts come on in America. It's like 5G built correct or built right and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, for God's sake.
Yeah.
I have a 5G contract and I haven't even been able to use 5G yet.
Yeah, I was looking at that. Like, they offered me like an upgrade. I was like, I don't even know where I would use it.
Yeah. Yeah. I when I switched from my iPhone last year to my Samsung, I got my 5G then, and I still haven't used it once for a whole year.
Yeah. I think probably over the next few years, like the city that I live by, I think is going to get it in 2022. It's predicted to have it. So
I think Cardiff's got 5G. I think is the nearest,
yeah,
or maybe Bristol. I don't know, but
I think Birmingham's getting a trial as well. But
there is actually a 5G tower in Malvern, but I don't know if it's for the public.
yeah, there's a test bed there.
Yeah. But yeah. Anyway, I think that's pretty much it for this week's episode. Sorry, everyone, if you were expecting one last week and then there wasn't one. But yeah, if you enjoyed this week's episode, make sure you give it a like if it's on YouTube. Give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. Make sure you give us a follow on Spotify. And yeah, guys, we will catch you in the Infinite Void next week.